7. I'd like to welcome everyone here today in attendance and ask everyone to rise for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can Miss Ritchie hear us?
I can now,
Oh,
but I
okay.
just now was able to hear you.
Okay. So we have
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, just now, sorry. You just now showed up on my screen.
Okay. So first line item or item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda.
With all due respect, I did not approve for this meeting to be changed to a regular meeting in a day's time. It went from what we thought was the working budget meeting to then finding out it was a special call meeting, which I believe that was correct. But then it was being changed back to a regular meeting without my approval. With that being said, I do not believe we have followed our own policies. So with all of that, I chose to call OEA today to get an opinion. They referred me to the AG's office, who advised me to submit a written request, and they will provide me an opinion. So with all that being said, I would like to make a motion to reschedule this meeting until our errors can be checked and or corrected.
So you made that motion?
Yes, sir.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All against say no.
Nay.
Everyone said no. Hmm?
I'm a nay.
Nay, okay. Motion does not pass.
Okay, Mr. Talby,
Yes?
given that motion is failed and based on my previous comments, I would like for it to be added to the record that I will be recusing myself after the working budget section of this meeting. I choose to recuse myself from items 5 and 6, and will be seeking the opinion of the Attorney General's office. I would also like to request that I receive the information on how or if I am able to retract my vote on the tax increase. Thank you.
I'd like to make just a brief statement before we get to the adoption agenda as well. Mr. Berryman, an apology from last week's meeting. I received a copy of our advertisement for legal services this week, and his proposal or his submission was exactly what it asked for, was letters of interest, so I apologize that I requested your application to be thrown out.
Well, if I may speak, apology is not necessary, but I accept it all the same. Thank you.
I also expressed to the board and Dr. McComas this week my concern in the process of how we advertised and how we received those requests, that they were not sealed bid, and requests that we follow what we did in 2018 when the last time we looked at, and that was before I was on the board, but there was a process, there was a document that everyone received, all the everyone that was responding to the RFP at that time evaluated, and also request that we actually go back and resubmit resubmit the advertisement, re-advertise. And in that advertisement for RFP, because the motion was for proposals, and my 25 years of working on RFPs, an RFP and letter of interest is different. And if there is a criteria other than the lowest bid, that needs to be submitted within that criteria so that everyone, including the applicants, know what they're going to be evaluated on. So with that said, I'll request that we resubmit for RFPs, and I'll make a motion that we tonight strike lines item 5 and 6 from the agenda.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion?
I believe that, I have talked to the Kentucky KSBA, and I know Dr. McComas has spoken with Wayne Young at KSA, and I just think that they have too much at risk to advise us to proceed if we were really, doing something wrong. I believe Wayne Young probably has, Dr. McComas says, not probably, does have her, best interests at heart. He's not going to advise her or set her up to fail, advise her to do something that has the potential to adversely affect each one of us. And I think there was some confusion. I wholeheartedly believe that he helped her straighten it out, and I'm fine with proceeding. And I do understand your concerns, but I believe that her conversation and the information that she's passed on to us should alleviate any concern that you might have. It does for me at least, and I understand if it doesn't for you, but that's how I view it.
KSBA refuses to rule on this at this point.
I'm just trying to look out for the best interest of the board by rebidding. A few weeks would not hurt anything, in my opinion. I just think that, and it's nobody's fault, I'm not blaming anybody. I just think that we need to follow the correct procedures on RFP with sealed bids open in open session. That's my request. So, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of removing items 5 and 6, say A. Aye. All not in favor, say aye.
Nay.
Motion does not pass. Just to note, since I do believe that we could be going down a bad path on this, I will be recusing myself after the internal board, after the student support services. Okay, public comments.
Let's see, before we adopt the agenda, I'd
Oh,
like
yeah,
to
I'm sorry.
see if we could add just a little bit of housekeeping, where we could appoint Dr. McComas as secretary. We could add that onto our agenda tonight.
I think we need to probably do that.
Okay.
Agree.
Say we put that, can we do that like a 4A?
That'd be good.
Will that be right? Everybody okay with that? Okay.
No, because I do not believe this is a regular agenda.
I think majority rules on that.
I was just stating for the record.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that, Mr. Thomas?
No, you have 3, so now you'll have a motion to adopt the agenda
Okay.
with
With the addition of 4A.
condition 4A.
Do we have a second for,
I'll make a second.
You don't,
I'm sorry, did you make a first?
Yes, I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda to include 4A.
So a motion by Ms. Richardson,
I'll second.
a second by Ms. Considine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, say no. No.
No,
Passes 3-2. Okay, I think student recognition, the gentleman could not make it tonight, so we'll skip that. And we'll go to public comments. Is there any additional public comments? Or just the one listed on the agenda? Is there additional? Okay. The first one up is Ms. Shonda Cecil.
You can, Shanda, you can stand there again. Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Cecil.
Hello, yes, I am Shanda Cecil, and I'm here with Becky McCrae on behalf of our tennis team. And our students are so thankful for the new tennis courts. They just can't believe they had to practice on those old courts after they've had these. And the parents are thankful too. We have gone to regional tournaments, and it was evident when we went to those regional tournaments that we would never be able to host one because there aren't bathroom facilities. So we just want to bring to the board the conversation of getting some bathroom facilities at the tennis courts. I don't know if there's still maybe some contract work out with the Allen Company where those could be still done, or if this needs to be something done in the future. And the tennis parents are more than happy to help, but we just want to get the conversation started. And so that was it. Anything else?
May I ask you a question? When you went to the regional tournaments, what kind of facilities did they have?
They had bathrooms. They only had a one-seater per sex, right? But they needed more. One of the parents on the team thought it would be nice to have some, while we're doing it, do some concessions while you're running the pipe, while you've got the building the footer, what have you, just a little bit more to do it the right way. So I would imagine 2 seats per sex would be adequate. Just my opinion, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Our next public comment comes from Mike Honaker.
I am Mike Honaker. I've just about lost my voice, so I apologize. I'll try to speak loudly. I watched last meeting on social media. I wasn't able to attend, but I watched it, and I heard some things that I didn't like. I didn't agree with, and it's with Agenda 5 and point 5 and 6 about maybe getting another attorney. The only reason I heard about maybe possibly removing Brian and getting another attorney was because somebody felt uncomfortable. Was there more reasons than that, or was there just uncomfortable? The reason I ask, if you're uncomfortable with Brian, that's a good thing. That means my tax dollars are working. If he makes you uncomfortable, good. Question everything he does. Question every word that comes out of his mouth. That's checks and balances. That's how the United States government works. If he has some professional animosity with you, that's a good thing for me. He's going to question everything you do. He's going to watch everything that you do. If you all are best friends, that's not a good thing. That makes clicks happen. Then things get missed. People aren't watching each other's back. Stuff gets swept under the rug. This is a good thing, professional animosity. When you bring in someone that doesn't make you uncomfortable, now my tax dollars aren't working. Now I know Brian. I've seen his resume, and it's stacked. He's not just a legal attorney. He teaches the law. He doesn't just know the law, he teaches the law. His family's been here 100 years, they'll be here 100 more. You're getting him a 2/3 cheap cheaper than the other attorney. I don't know who the other attorney is. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. I don't care. The only thing I do know is that they're 2.5 times more money, and they didn't get their application in time. That's the only two things I know. So to be uncomfortable and spend more of my tax dollars because you're uncomfortable to get rid of Brian and put in another attorney that may not have the resume that he has, that makes me uncomfortable. When I get uncomfortable because you're spending my tax dollars for no reason, making them go up, that's going to make these meetings uncomfortable going forward. So I really ask for you to think about what you're doing and not be comfortable. Checks and balances. That's what I like. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends the public comment section. Superintendent's report.
Since it was just a week from last meeting, I'm excited again about Mr. Harris being our student board member. And we have been redoing things in central office and around the districts and freshening up. I'm pointing to our new Chief Mulligan. No, I'm pointing to our mission and vision. So I just kind of wanted to read that and show some of the things that we're doing to embrace that by revisiting the current vision and mission and belief statements that we have. So Clark County Public Schools is one community, one vision, life ready, where every student matters. We join with our community to address the individual needs of students in a safe, caring environment so that they are prepared for college, careers, and life. Our belief statements are that Clark County Public School District believes in excellence is achieved by meeting needs of all students, that we have a mutual cooperation between schools, community is necessary to meet those needs of all students, and that the faculty can achieve quality instruction and academic excellence when they work together, that poverty is not an obstacle to excellence, and that all children will develop a respect for themselves as well as others. And so these are things that we are doing in those lead times, again, and just revisiting the current vision, mission, and belief statements that we have that I don't feel like we previously were really embracing in the past. They were just kind of present, but not active. So we are excited to do that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. So we move on to student support services. Consider adoption of the 2021-22 working budget. Ms. Ellis.
Good evening, everyone. Let's sit back here and grab the clippers first. It's a cover. Okay. Let's see. Make sure I do this right. Okay. So the working budget, hopefully you all have had a chance to look through the PowerPoint that was presented. Are there any questions you all want to start with before we jump into kind of a high overview of what you've been given? Are there anything specific that you have questions about? No? Okay. So this is the final step of our budgeting process, but as you all know, the budget is never final. It is always ever changing through the entire school year. But we are required by KRS to submit this budget to the state by the 30th. So it is very important that we make a decision on this budget tonight. Typically, we have a 2% reserve in our contingency, which thankfully ours is above that 2%, but they did waive that due to all the COVID situation with many districts struggling. All right, so let's hop into Fund 1. So Fund 1, or our general fund, is our largest fund. This is the fund where our tax dollars go, our SEEP dollars go. And these are just some of, from the tentative budget change level to now, the changes that we have made. So we have increased our revenue base from the tentative level in May, when you all were presented the budget, till now, almost $559,000. So that's great news. Large portion of that is in relation to the tax increase that you all just adopted. We had a few adjustments with our beginning balance and indirect costs. So if you'll remember, we stood here a few months ago and we talked about those indirect costs that we're taking advantage of now because of these ESSER funds, these federal dollars that we have received, and we have this opportunity to take indirect costs on these grants that we typically in this district have never utilized. And basically what those costs do are there are funds that are allowed for us to take out of those grants and put into our general fund. So the government gives you a formula and a percentage that allows you to use a portion of very restricted grant monies that have to be spent in a certain way to unrestrict and then put in your general fund for you all to use as the board's discretion, because you know Fund 1 is the board's discretion budget. And a lot of that is to cover things like our auditing costs, our finance costs, our HR costs. There's a lot of things that your departments do that are paid out of general fund to help facilitate these grants. And so this is kind of a way of recapturing some of those costs back to cover those services. So with that new process, I'm just gonna be honest, I wasn't 100% sure how moving from Fund 2 grants into Fund 1 worked. So when we presented it, we said, oh, we're gonna take that all on June 30th. It's gonna show up in the beginning balance. Well, after multiple conversations with auditors and other districts and getting more information myself on this topic since we spoke, you can only take those costs as you spend the grant. So we're still going to get that much money that we talked about, almost $2.5 million. It's just going to be over the life of the grant for the 3-year period. So you're gonna see when you look at the budget, the change of, we were thinking we were gonna have an $8.5 million beginning budget. We only have roughly a $7.4 million. But I was only thinking we were gonna have like $65,000 in indirect costs from our current grants. Like, cause had taken off the top, those ESSER grants. Well, now you're seeing a budget for this year, year 1 essentially, of $1.2 million. And then you're gonna see that for the following years. So budget's really the same, it's just in different categories. So I didn't want you to be concerned about that when you saw that movement of that budget. Also, considerations that we know that have occurred with SEEK, and you were included in the packet, that SEEK calculation. They've changed some of the numbers of how the state level calculates, and we've added in our PBA changes and some student count, the way they calculate and equalize things at the state level. So that actually increased our SEEK a little bit, that 179,000. And then your tax levy, once we crunched all the numbers and how that fell out against the tentative budget to those numbers of taking that rate, we're looking at almost 500,000 we're adding in just from the tax rate. So it's a nice little chunk of revenue we've added due to your all's decisions. So revised, any questions on revenues before I move on to expenses? Is everybody? Okay. So expenses, so from the tentative level to the working, we have increased our expense budget, and I kind of gave the overview of what increased those things. So some of those decisions, we have actually recaptured some of our expenses due to conversations that Dr. McComas and I have had about areas we can save and some positions that we would not rehire due to attrition and kind of, what's the word I want to use, the duties kind of being spread back out among the departments.
Reallocation.
Reallocation and duties. Thank you. I said, what's the word I want? So we've captured almost $436,000 in doing that we saved on the budget, which is a good thing because we've also increased the budget. So we've talked about those encumbrance carry forwards. Those are purchase orders that were encumbered last year that didn't get paid out by June 30th. They carry the budget essentially into this school year with them. We roll them over. So that came into the budget, $368,000. So decisions that you all have made in regards to the salary tables and then certain items that were brought to you such as paving and that type of stuff that we've moved the contingency budget to purchase, that all added up to $945,000, all of those changes. So we made several salary table changes between May and now, and that's what it adds up to. And then the classified retirement rate, we were hoping legislation would freeze that again, but they did not. It went up 12%, so we went from 24.06% to 26.95%. And then our workers' compensation rates went up just a smidge from what last year was. So between those two things, we're looking at our benefits have gone up $461,000. And then just conversations that we have had with departments since May, Dr. McComas, and even a few conversations that Mr. Christie had prior to his leaving. equated to $382,000 being added back into budgets. And you received also in your packet a summary sheet that included all of those changes, whereas I just did the lump sum here in this PowerPoint. Any questions on that stuff specifically?
So our budget's increased a little south of $1 million.
So with all that being said, the next slides are actually going to kind of show the summary of where we stand between revenues and expenses on the budget. But, so you see this beginning balance. It's kind of hard to read here, so hopefully you can see that in your packet. But we've just kind of, historically, I've always shown you past budgets, kind of where we've stood over the years. Just so we're still focusing on this year right now, we're looking at projected revenues for this fiscal year, a little over $39 million, and then projected expenses are a little over $38 million. So we are not, which is good news, spending out our entire revenues this fiscal year. We are going to have some left over, $650,000. So that is good news that we are not fully expending our revenues for the year, so we're not dipping into our contingency unless there's just specific things that come about that are necessary that you all are presented with. So we're looking at, 90% expense spend against our revenue. And historically, you can see the last 4 years, we have been in a deficit against spending, and a lot of that is not taking the full 4% that we could have taken and our staffing levels that we are at. We, at this point, have some staff over on the ESSER grant that we talked about last time we were here that we're going to have to eventually pull back to general fund. So yes, it's fantastic we have that $650,000, but we still need to be forward thinking for the next few years that that's still not quite enough extra to bring all of those people back. So there's some decisions that we're still going to have to make as the next 2 to 3 years roll on, okay? So last column, we have had a few conversations with our auditor in regards to this one-time salary increase. And we just want to be upfront with you. Dr. McComas and I want to make sure you are aware of what we are dealing with in negotiations we're having with our auditor. And other districts have done salary increases or stipends out of the ESSER grants, but we've also found out that their auditors did not agree with that decision, and it was part of their audit findings. And so obviously we never want an audit finding. And I have reached out to the auditor once I was finding this out for some other finance officers that was occurring in their audits, because a lot of them have already been audited for the year, whereas we're just in that process this week. My auditors are here this week. They were in here today and will be here all week working on stuff. But a lot of them did that last year, so they're finding this out now. And his initial reaction is that federal dollars do not necessarily fit the bill to make this type of payment district-wide. It's typically more specific in the areas of how you're paying that. So we just wanted to, we've made the commitment. We've made the commitment to pay the $3,000 to our staff. We are not going to pull that back. They will get that $3,000 one-time, 2 payments in November and March. This is how we plan to facilitate that if the auditors say ESSER funds cannot cover it. We will have to take it out of general fund. So you're going to see your general fund dip this year significantly to accommodate that payment if that is what is necessary per our auditor. However, we do have a plan in place that there are some general fund allowable expenses that he agrees are allowable expenses that can be moved over to the ESSER fund to free up those general fund dollars to kind of recoup this payment back over the next couple of years. So we just wanted to make you aware of that situation in case it occurs this year. He will be here tomorrow, and hopefully we can get a firm answer.
You'll know this week, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
So the big difference is it's not a 1-for-1, it's a 1-for-3.
Yes.
So the ESSER money is a one-time pullout, where if we move over the like fringe benefits and other allowable expenses, it has to be divided out over those 3 years. So it's the same amount of money that can be flipped, but it can't be pulled out at one time. It would have to be as the need comes up for the fringe benefits, if it does need to get switched. But we have a plan that's going to protect being able to give the bonuses to staff.
Any questions on that? We just wanted to be upfront. And I don't have a final answer for you, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of that in the presentation tonight of our dollars.
So the negative 1.8 million may not be a total, that may not be the final total if we're going to move certain things over,
So that would be the total for this fiscal year.
okay?
We would be dipping into our contingency 1.8 million to cover the one large payout of 3.5 million essentially for that one-time salary payment, because that's what we've got budgeted right now is the 3.5 million, which is Dr. McComas said. So one time out of the grant and we're done with it. And it doesn't affect, because that's the pot of money it's sitting at. But over here, it's a large 3.5 million pullout, and then I'm swapping what we've talked about, the 3-year mark. So it's only gonna be 1.8 million, but then we're gonna recoup another million each year by moving expenses over to the grant in those budgeting cycles, so that we get back to even essentially on that 3.5 million.
Well, we got approval from some agency to use ESSER funds for that one time. Did we?
Well,
Or-
we did not necessarily get approval because it was, in the sense, talked about when all of these other districts, and they did get approval from KDE of using ESSER funds for that. And we've gotten guidance in different meetings that it's an allowable expenditure code on the budget for stipends or extra pay. But as far as getting an official notice from them that it's approved, they pretty much stopped sending those official, yes, that's approved for your ESSER funds, because the federal government keeps changing the rules quite often. And so a lot of things they initially said, oh yeah, you can do that. The federal government has come back and said, no, you can't do that. So the terms now for, it used to be this or that on the different regulations of how ESSER funds could be used, but now it's a COVID and these things. And it used to be an or in between there, and the federal government changed that. So a lot of people who made this salary payment the first time around was in that or situation, which is now changed, and while their auditors are now kind of coming back at them, federal, those really weren't allowable. How are you justifying that? So we feel like we have a strong case of why this is a justifiable expense for even the and piece of COVID created the situation we're in. COVID has caused everything that we are dealing with, and the whole point of why you gave this one-time salary and all the extra work that our staff is having to pick up and do with mask, enforcement and extra cleaning of the stations, of all the high-touch areas and the after schools and the virtual, and there's a lot of justifiable means of we think we fit. It's a 1 through 12 category of choosing and COVID related. We feel like we have a strong argument for that, but we still have to wait on the auditor's final approval as far as can we use the federal funding, or are we gonna have to pick it up out of general fund? So we are gonna have that conversation this week with him. But we just hadn't had it yet by this meeting to be able to give you a firm answer on that. So we wanted to make sure you are aware of the scenario. Okay? All right. So that's the budgets. So the next slide is actually showing our actuals of how we ended for each of those years that we were projecting those budgets. And you can see the very last column, we've added kind of a worse or better, like here was our budget projection. Did we end worse or better than that year? And so you can kind of see 17-18, we ended worse, and the biggest expense that occurred that year was our athletic complex. We moved a large portion of our monies out of contingency to that athletic complex. We also had multiple growth positions that year that were over $500,000 in growth positions. The next year, 18-19, it was better. So what we had projected, we actually came in better than that year. Still, again, we had expenses that occurred, but no major things that made us go out of our budget that year. 19-20, we were worse. We moved more money to the athletic complex for the turf, was the largest expenditure that year. We did salary table increases that year, but we did not raise to the full 4% tax revenue. So that came out of contingency. And again, we had more multiple growth positions that year. 2021, we were better. So we stayed within our spending limits that year of what we brought in. 21, 22, we are projecting the 98%, hoping to stay within that, but we will stand here this time next year and say if we're better or worse. So, and again, 22, we have that possible one-time salary increase, which unfortunately will make us worse if we have to end up doing that, but like I said, we have a plan in place to recoup that. So any questions with Fund 1? That's the bulk of the changes. That's where the majority of everything has occurred. Everybody good? In that fund? So Fund 2, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the next slides because these are really more informational, not a whole lot of changes, but typically we never book a grant till we know what our award is. So at the tentative level, you can see overall at the end of the tentative level, we knew at that point we had 3.9 million. Now we know we have 7.3 million. And this is not considering all those ESSER funds. This is just stuff that we got awarded this fiscal year, okay? And I didn't skip through it. So you've got local grants, state grants, federal grants. And then we've got Fund 22, which is our district activity. There's a little synopsis of what those are. We don't budget for these until we actually receive funds. Same concept with Fund 25, our school activities. We do not budget these funds until they are actually physically cash received for them to be able to spend it out. And this is stuff that's generated at the school level. These are fees that they charge for different clubs and all that different kind of stuff that they have, fundraisers, field trips, those type of things. And you all are starting to, and Mr. Talby has made a comment on some of the payables that are school activity related. You're starting to see some payables items that you did not typically see, Arbiter Pay being one of those, because we are now paying everything through Munis. We used to have a separate software system called EPS that the school accounting did their own school accounting, and you all never saw those reports. It was totally separate. But everything is now in Munis starting this fiscal year. So you're starting to see some expenditures of that school activity account that you all were not seeing prior. And that's also part of why we changed some policy on check cutting and that kind of thing, because there's sometimes one-off, we've got to get checks cut for the school to issue payments for things that they've got to get paid right now. So that was part of, you know, the necessary, if we need to cut a check, that type of stuff. We had that discussion a couple years ago in changing that check writing policy. Any questions on district or school activity? Okay. So construction fund, again, this is a fund that is only budgeted in the year that we start a project. So you're going to see a budget this year for our BG projects we've started for Phoenix and preschool. We've put the budgets in because we started those in this fiscal year. So that typically you would see all zeros if we didn't have an active project on the table.
From our last meeting, the budget for the preschool.
Yes, so I had all of this put together and submitted prior to
Okay.
the decision-making for that increase, but you will see as the monthly report comes out, we will be increasing that budget in 360 to match the new BG. But you are correct, it is the old budget. 400 is where we pay our debt service, our bonds that we have bonded, that you all got to hear about, you know, our bonding capacity last week. This is basically, once you all sell a bond, this is the fund it gets recorded in, and we pay that debt service annually. So this year, our principal and interest on our bonds is right at $4.2 million. And we have a portion of our capital outlay fund committed to that, and then the remainder portion is from our building fund. And that gives you all still, even with our capital funds total between the two funds, you still have available $659,000 basically for more capital expenditures, which a portion of that, as you see, has already been committed to maintenance summer projects that we made that decision on back or a few months ago. So you'll be seeing a capital funds request come across once all of those expenditures are complete and done, because I can't submit it until I have an invoice paid out of the general fund essentially to the state for that capital fund request. You will see me submitting a capital fund request to you all to move this money back to general fund. So that still leaves on the table $182,000 to commit to something capital related, meaning buildings. It has to be maintenance and improvements of our buildings. That's what our capital funds have to be used for. Fund 51 is our food service account, and I've included a little synopsis here of, changes which are very similar to some of the changes in general fund because of the salary table stuff that also affects Fund 51. And I'm going to flip on over to the summary of the budgets. So you can see her working budget, that beginning balance has declined, and her projected revenues are even down. And this is due to COVID. This is due to not operating at full capacity in person truly affects the food service budget, because that is how their monies are built is how many meals do they serve. And being in the situation we've been in the last year and a half, she's not been able to serve as many meals as she typically would in person. So, she's kind of trying to reflect that in her budget just because she's not sure what to expect on the revenue stream. And so that's what we've got based. But she is projecting having more expenses this year being back in person. So she is looking at, she lost this last year. I'm going to go ahead and flip to actual so we can talk those numbers. This past fiscal year, she actually decreased. You can see the last couple of years she has decreased in her budget. We've been taking indirect costs from her over the years, but we did quit that due to COVID. Because she was already in the deficit, and if she gets below her actual monies, which she does still have a beginning balance, general fund has to cover it. So we just kind of stopped that because it's like there's no point in depleting her funds if we're going to have to cover it anyway. But she has lost revenue over the last couple of years, 19, 20, 21, directly related to COVID, not being able to serve those meals. She is still projecting a loss this year just because she's expecting to spend out everything. Hopefully that does not occur, but worst case scenario is what she has budgeted for, and so that's reflected in her budget. So that is pretty much the summary of all of our funds. Are there any questions now that we've walked through? Anything that's popped that you have questions about? And you have a recommended motion on the last thing to adopt our budget so that I can submit it to the state by the deadline of the 30th.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 2021-22 working budget as described.
Good catch on that.
Oh, did I mess it up?
That's the,
22.
it says 2022, 22. That's okay.
Okay, you all, pregnancy brain is real, I'm just gonna tell you.
And she's had three other people look at that too. Maybe in one of them I didn't catch the last slide.
So we have a motion by Ms. Hendricks. We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Richardson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. What do we, Ashley, I didn't hear yours.
I don't know if she's still.
She there?
I'm here, I'm abstaining.
So abstaining, that'd still be a 5-0.
Correct.
Okay, passes. On to item number 3, review of the third credit card payment process. Ms. Ellis.
So last week there were some questions about our fifth third process. So I just wanted to put this PowerPoint together and kind of just give a good overview to make sure we all understood exactly how that process worked. Are there any questions after looking at this? Did it clarify some stuff? Do you have more questions? Do you want me to answer anything? I just wanted to make sure you understood how that really worked and the step process of how that flowed through our department.
I don't have any, I know you're looking at me.
No, I just want to make sure we all
It's okay.
understand, 'cause I just want to be totally above board and
Yeah.
that it's,
It just, it just sticks out every month because
Yeah.
there's such a large number on there. And I just don't know if that is, if that's what other districts do, if that's, normal, it's just, and making sure, is there a PO for, like, if a teacher needs something, I don't, they need to go down and get whatever they need for class.
So this
but
follows the
how does that work?
same procurement procedures that if you bought a PO and issued it to a vendor instead of using the credit card, it's the same step process. They have to request to be able to purchase whatever items they're gonna purchase. And basically, the purchase order either gets created to Fifth Third, or if it's a vendor who accepts our credit card, the PO gets created directly to them and we go make the purchase. So let's just start with the card. So they're gonna still request from their principal or their department director, hey, I need to go to this store and purchase this, but they don't take a purchase order. I'm gonna have to have the credit card. So they create a PO to Fifth Third. They come check out the credit card because the credit cards are not maintained on anyone's person. They are maintained in our vault for director level cards here at central office, and then principals have cards in their names at their schools and they maintain those in their safes. So the card is always locked up unless it has been checked out to use, and so there's a log where they have to check that card out. But they cannot check that card out if they don't already have a purchase order.
Okay, that was kind of.
So the funds get encumbered first
Mhm.
before they can even get possession of the card. So they then check the card out, they go make their purchase, get their receipt, make sure we didn't get charged sales tax, they take a sales tax exemption form with them. They bring all that back to the bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper now has the receipt and the purchase order, and then she balances that monthly against the credit card statement. So the statement that you all see that gets put in the board packet, like that comes to us monthly, and there, you see it's leveled out by each person on the one statement, and so whoever manages that portion of the statement, that secretary, makes sure all the charges, they should have a PO and an invoice to go with every charge that is listed there. And then that's what you're seeing to Fifth Third on, most likely the addendum is when we pay that portion of that card, because we're waiting on all those different people to get their documents in. So sometimes we don't meet the deadline for the regular meeting, but we get it paid by the addendum piece on the 26th of the month. And then we have certain vendors who accept virtual cards. So how that process works is we still create the purchase order to the vendor. We make our purchase, they send us an invoice like normal if we had cut a check. But when we go into the system and issue the payment, instead of it cutting a check, it's creating this file that we then upload to Fifth Third Bank. And then Fifth Third takes that information we gave them and issues one-off credit card numbers. So a virtual credit card number that can be used one time, and it can only be used for the amount that we told them to use it for. They can't do a portion of it, they can't do more than it. It is specifically for the invoice amount that we paid. So if we owed Office Depot $1,012, they can't try to pay it for $1,000, they can't try to pay it for $1,013, they can only issue that card payment that they received for $1,012. So it's a very secure piece in making that payment. And then that's that very large Fifth Third payment you saw of the $188,000 on this past payables. Because that's again, 1 month statement, we paid all these vendors by that credit card. So Fifth Third gave them their money essentially. You know, we sent the file, Fifth Third essentially for 30 days, I don't like the term, but it is what it is, floated our money to our vendors and paid it. And so we didn't have, so it helps with cash flow because we had 30 days before we had to really pay that money out, but our vendors were paid earlier than getting a paper check in the mail. And then we pay the credit card payment to Fifth Third, which is that very large lump sum you all saw on the payables.
Is there a
monthly.
limit to an amount to be purchased? It seemed like there was a large amount that was put on the credit card. And,
So,
and this last, the last time, last week when we looked, I think it was like 50,000.
yeah, so we actually have a credit limit of $450,000 with Fifth Third. And that's all of our credit cards total, our virtual cards, our plastic cards, it's all of it together. That's our credit card limit. Let me see if I flip
But
to.
is there an individual limit, I guess?
Yes, so there's individual limits, and part of why I like this system is we call these procurement cards versus credit cards. I know we're standing here referencing credit cards, but they're really procurement cards because there's a lot of safety nets in place, and these are what the statement bills look like. But I was gonna try to get to our rebate portion, and I didn't put that on there. I totally left that off. Well, the best part of this program is the rebate program, and I totally didn't put a slot in there for that. So basically, everything that we charge with Fifth Third, whether it's the plastic card or these virtual cards, goes into the consortium of districts who participate in this program is what drives the rebate percentage. You have universities participating, other school districts such as ourselves participating. There's a lot of Kentucky school districts. But basically, that consortium, wherever it stands, which it's at its highest level of 1.45% right now. So basically, our spend annually we get, they add all that up and how that falls back out with all of our vendors we've spent with, and we get 1.45% back on anything we spend with these Fifth Third cards. And so, exciting with that is that can be directed to something very specific in our district, which we're talking about what exactly that can be directed to be intentional with those dollars. So it builds another revenue source for the board to be able to do something very exciting with that.
Do we get that once a year? Or
we get it annually in February. They cut the check in February. The first year we did it, we started in I think we didn't start the program till September, and so then they cut a check in February, and we got a rebate of $8,000. A full year, we had almost $19,000. So, and that was during COVID, because we started right before COVID hit. So that's with a COVID year of not really spending normal expenditure. So I'm hoping, being back in the school year normal now, and we are already seeing on track that we're going to surpass the 19,000. We're hoping closer to the 25,000 mark for that rebate. So it's exciting to see that number grow. I get a monthly report of what our spend is, and I match that back to make sure I agree with the checks we sent them, and it always agrees. They're fantastic on their numbers. So it's an exciting program. So there's not individual, like I said, we have the 450,000 district-wide, and a large portion of that we now use with Amazon. But I have the ability with these procurement cards to individually set a limit per card for the physical card. And we have 22 plastic cards, and they're all assigned to either a director or a principal, assistant principal, someone in leadership that has that card in their name and taking responsibility for that. Good.
Thank you
You're very welcome.
Thank you for that. Okay, on to item number 4, consider approval of change order number 1 to Duke's Roofing and Exterior Construction for the Park Middle School renovation project in the amount of $7,876.20.
Yes, that can be me as well.
Okay. Okay.
So back in we had a meeting on July 17th of 2018 is when you actually approved this change order. It's just we did not do the FAC pack, which is the new construction programming, this FAC pack version. So we need that official document approved and signed to upload to KDE to close this project out. That's the last thing we're kind of waiting on to move forward in the steps. They have to create a BG4 and then I have to do a BG5, but we can't even do the BG4 because this change order is not in FAC pack. So it's not reflecting the correct amount of monies until they get this change order in. And KDE will not approve the old version that you all board approved in 2018. They want the FAC pack version approved. So really this is kind of a housekeeping item of just getting the paperwork formatted the way they want it.
Why is it titled Clark Middle?
Well, that's what the BG was initiated when the project was initiated in 2015 to do their renovations. It was Clark Middle renovated to Baker, essentially. But that's what the BG was titled.
So we leave it as Clark Middle then?
Yes, because that's the official project name on that BG when it was initiated back in 2015.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the change order number 1.
Have a motion by Ms. Considine. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Ms. Hendricks. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Internal board business is next. I'll request a. Oh, I'm sorry, I did, I wrote it down too. I did write it down. We have a 4A, thank you. On the 4A, discussion and to approve Dr. McComas as Secretary of Clark County Board of Education.
I'll make the motion to appoint Dr. McComas as our secretary.
Have a motion by Ms. Hendricks,
And I'll second.
second by Ms. Richardson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ashley, did you vote? Ms.
I said aye.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ritchie. Passes 5-0. Okay. On to internal board business. I request a 5-minute recess, and then we'll get started.
ahead and state that we need to elect.
You would state on the record why there is a vacancy in the position of chair and vice chair.
Okay, we have a vacancy of our chair and our vice chair who is abstained from this section of the meeting. We need to create a temporary chair as a, what was the term?
Chairman pro tem.
Chairman pro tem. I have a motion for someone to become the chairman pro tem for this section of the meeting.
I'll make a motion to have Megan Hendricks as interim chair,
Chairman pro tem.
pro tem, for this meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, motion carries. Would that be 3-0?
3-0.
Okay, on to internal board business. Number 5, attorney interviews. We have 3 applicants, and they are all 3 present.
Could we entertain them coming and pull some chairs up? And
That's
have,
You want to interview us collectively or individually? or how do you-
I think together. Why not?
Up here?
Yes.
Mr. Boyle, how about we let you sit right here in the middle? How's that?
Oh, goodness.
That's fine.
Or if it's, I don't know if it's fine for you.
Tear anything up.
Okay, we have present, Mr. Brian Thomas, who serves as our current attorney. We have, Mr. Mitchell Berryman, who, has applied, and Rebecca McCoy with White Tech Carrington. Is that correct? Yes. Do you want to maybe add anything, each of you, maybe additional to your experience, anything that you think that we need?
Introduce yourself?
Introduce yourself, anything additionally you think we need to know?
Sure.
Yes.
My name's Rebecca McCoy. Most people call me Becky. Tell you a little bit about myself, maybe to make you more comfortable. I live and work in Mount Sterling, and I'm here on behalf of my firm, White Tech Carrington. I've been a partner there for 3 years. I've been practicing there for 11. Like I said, I live and work in Mount Sterling. I have a 17-year-old stepson who's getting ready to go to college. He's a senior at Montgomery County High, and I have a 3-year-old who attends preschool here in Clark County at St. Agatha. So I'm over here twice a day these days lately, picking him up or getting him or vice versa. I've been practicing for, like I said, 11 years. My practice is pretty diverse. I do quite a bit of domestic law and then some just civil defense, some personal injury. We like to pride ourselves at White Tech Carrington that we have a full-service law firm. We have 5 partners currently, and we offer everything from criminal defense to transactional law, business law. My partner, Shelley Williams, I wish she could be here tonight. She's actually at another board meeting. Our firm currently represents other boards of education. We would propose that our firm represent the board. I would be primarily responsible for board meetings, but she would also be available as needed. She has over 20 years' experience in education law, and she's attended several National School Board Association meetings and been to the last, I don't know how many, Kentucky School Board Association meetings and conferences. I myself have done quite a bit in the school law arena. I've represented superintendents in contracts disputes. I've assisted her with different things that have come up with our school board work. She and I together have represented a couple different boards doing independent investigations, some personnel matters. As far as my availability, I think it's at the board's discretion if you want me at every meeting or only certain meetings, maybe regular meetings but not working meetings. I'm available at your discretion. I think I put in my letter of interest my hourly rate. I bill in 10th an hour segments. We have always at our law firm taken the position that for a public entity, legal fees should be for services rendered, not just a flat fee. There's actually a provision in the Kentucky Constitution, I think it's Section 3, that talks about services for public organizations, that it should be in consideration of public services. And there's differing opinions on that. It's not real clear, but I've always personally looked at it like I should bill for what I do. So some months that may be a handful of hours, some months it may be more if there's litigation going on, if there's personnel issues, if there's a lot of open records requests that have to be reviewed. But if you all have any questions, let me know. And it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hopefully working with you.
Thank you. Mr. Biggerman?
Well, I'm honored to be in front of the Clark County School Board and Clark County Superintendent, Madam Secretary. I was born and raised in Clark County. I've lived the majority of my life in Clark County. The Berryman family has been in this county predating the year 1900. Indeed, this is the only thing I have a lot of pride in as far as my history, my family history. Tom Berryman, who was my great-grandfather, named Trapp. 3 of my family members have been educators. Most recently, my sister Bonnie Bradley, who was obviously a Berryman, retired here I think about 2 years ago. My grandmother, Mary Berryman, retired around 1970, and she was a member, she was a school teacher here in Clark County. My great-great-uncle, and we called him Clark Berryman, he was actually a superintendent in Clark County. I was married for the first time 4 years ago, and for marital purposes, I live in Griffin Gate, which is about 16 miles away from here. I've had a private practice in Clark County for over 30 years. I'd be available any time of the day. When I'm not in court, I take telephone calls. I would be here every board meeting. And I've submitted my hourly rate. I'd like to tell you that in my 30 years of experience, I've done everything from contract law to real estate. I feel that the most important thing for an attorney is to do the proper research prior to the meeting. So one of the things that I decided that I would go over is what I would do prior to the meeting. I would email each and every board member and ask them if they had any questions regarding the law. That would give me time to research those questions to make sure I had a good answer rather than giving it off the cuff, which is not a good way to do it. If there is a question of law that's brought up during the meeting of the board, I would most likely ask if I could take it back with me until the next board meeting so that I could research it. Now, if it's something very easy, I'll go ahead and answer it. So, are there any questions from the board?
Thank you, Mr. Biggerman. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you. My name is Brian Thomas, and I currently serve as the board attorney and have since January of 2019. Beginning in 1992, I went to work for CSX, a division of CSX, which is the largest inland transportation company in America. During that time, I was able to learn about workers' comp, self-funded insurances. I also learned about OSHA, which I was able to use recently to help remedy a school board issue. I did that work from 1992 to 1997. I was actually worked in the legal department. We did human resources, we did hiring, we did firing, we did contracts, we did multi-million-dollar transactionals, and we did facility planning and construction. So I'm familiar with all of the documents that we use for all of our BG1s, as I have been using them for the last 20 years. I've been practicing law, this is my going into my 28th year, graduated in 1994. Then beginning in 2001, I began teaching at the University of Kentucky. So I've been a professor of law and have taught legal theory to students at the University of Kentucky in classes ranging anywhere from 34 to 55. So I'm familiar with the teaching aspect of it. I understand the educational laws. I get to utilize that. Also, I'm familiar with ADA requirements, IEP requirements, as we continue to deal with those even on a college level. Beginning in 2000, from 2000 to 2003, I actually served on the Calvary Christian School Board, was vice chair and chairman. We actually started from a preschool program. We actually went from preschool through 8th grade, and during that time I actually had to develop Kentucky, a curriculum that would meet the core content at the time. That's what Kentucky was doing. We've based upon the Rose case, which was the 1994 case, which kind of set all of our educational history upside down. But during that time on the board, we actually did all the curriculum. We set all the policies, all the procedures, all the handbooks, the student handbooks. We created protocol. We made sure that we were in compliance with all facilities and staffing requirements. So I spent 4 years doing that. Then beginning in 2007 if I could go back, in 1997 and 1998, I was an assistant county attorney here in Clark County. My job was to prosecute juvenile cases. So during that particular time, I became familiar with the juvenile code and how it impacted Clark County. I worked with the school teachers, DPP, to go ahead and make sure that we were fulfilling our requirements, making sure that we were communicating. Back then, Carolyn Knuckles was the person who did that. From 2007 until 2018, I was the county attorney. During that time, the SROs got my personal cell phone number, and I worked with them daily on having to deal with school issues. I've done multi-million-dollar contracts. We've actually done contracts here. I've done OSHA. We've done human resources. I actually do work for a number of companies. I have a company that's got probably 300, 400 employees. We do all of their HR work. We do corporate transactions. So I have a vast amount of experience. I am familiar with open records appeals. In the 12 years that I was the county attorney, we never lost an open records appeal. So I take open records and open meetings very seriously in how that is. And I would just ask for your consideration to continue on in my capacity. With respect to our fee, I think that money should be spent on the kids. It shouldn't be spent on attorneys, and it shouldn't be spent on board members, and that's why you all only get $150 a meeting. Our proposal was $80 an hour for 25 hours, and we give the 25 hours every month. I would continue to, if you all didn't want me to attend every meeting for the first 25 hours, I would still bill it at $80 an hour, because once again, I would rather you take the money and hire a teacher, hire a service, hire a programming coordinator, get someone. Dr. McComas is real big on having somebody be able to do their social media or communications. So our firm would continue to do that rate at $80. You say, well, why so cheap? Because once again, it's about the kids. Mr. Behrman said his family predates 1900. I live in a house that was built in 1780. My first family member was buried in 1824 in Clark County. So we've been here for a long time. Both of my children are products of the Clark County school system. My wife is a teacher who has been teaching in this school system since '99. And so it's all about the kids and it's not about us. So, I would make that commitment to you. I think in the last 2.5 years, I think that we have billed more than the retainer rate less than half a dozen times. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Considine, would you like to begin and start the question?
Sure. I think you kind of touched it a little bit in your opening remarks, but if maybe you could just share what you think the roles and responsibilities are as a local school board attorney, excuse me. I mean, just jump in, just conversation. I know it's kind of hard. Welcome to a teacher interview. Sorry.
I don't want to jump in. I think the school board attorney is a unique role because you represent the board as a body politic. You don't represent the individual members. You represent the board as a whole. You don't represent the superintendent individually. but it requires communication with individual board members. I know whenever we tend to like communication more streamlined, either from the chair or from the superintendent, unless an individual board member has particular issues. But it's to provide advice to the board, to prevent the board from doing an action that might be illegal, that might end up in litigation, that might run afoul of open meetings or open records. It's basically just to serve as a safeguard to prevent the board from litigation or unnecessary exposure and to make sure proper procedures are followed. I heard the comments earlier from the gentleman, and I respect his opinion, but I don't believe the board attorney, I don't believe that role is to serve as a checks and balance. It's not an elected role, as your roles are. I'm not a member of the public. I'm a member to advise you and to protect your interests as board member, as the board, and to prevent any potential liability, litigation, or running afoul of something such as open meetings or open records.
And also, you all have set this out. I mean, you know, you say, what is our role? I mean, our role is set out in your all's policy and procedures. I mean, you all actually have a board policy, 01.7 AP.1, which says, here's what the role of the board attorney is. So, you know, it talks about special needs of local school districts, analyze integrating school district information, consulting with local board members, superintendent, and other staff members, or members in planning. You know, I receive emails and phone calls all the time. Currently, we have contract issues that are being issued or dealt with. We have property disputes. So it is to basically to serve as a resource to the, not just the school board as a body politic. And as McCoy indicated, you know, this body only has power when it meets as a body. It can only vote. It can only do that as a body. And as the staff attorney or the board attorney, we only represent you as a body politic. But our goal is to ensure that if something is not going on right, that it's addressed. And so, but all of the duties that are set forth in that policy and procedure is what I would echo, that's what we're supposed to do.
I think the board attorney's duty is to serve the board, and in the capacity as board attorney, to advise the board on law, to protect and advising them, to protect them from harm, as you know, when you're advising them. I also believe that it is to work with everyone, and there's always going to be some disagreements on the board. The attorney simply provides the law for the board to listen to. And as a attorney for the board, I would be well prepared and with legal issues, and would provide the board with the law and my interpretation of the law, and let the board make decisions using that law.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for that little round table discussion.
Sherry, or Ms. Richardson, I'm gonna let you go next.
Well, thank you all for being here. Probably this just goes to Mr. Berriman because the other two have addressed it. Do you have any school board experience?
No, I do not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I just kind of have a broad question. I know you're obviously local. Mr. Berriman, you work here in town, right?
I've worked here for 30 years.
Ms. McCoy, you travel from Montgomery County, and I know that different things were laid out. Obviously, with the two gentlemen, there would be no mileage consideration or anything like that. Is that something that your firm charges?
Typically, yes, but that's something I've actually spoke to my partners about, and they left that in my discretion because I'm not a local attorney. Our mileage rate, I actually looked that up in anticipation of that question, is normally $19.04 from Mount Sterling to Clark County. I would be willing to waive that to any meetings. Now, if I have to go to, you know, Lexington to attend something on your behalf or somewhere else, of course I would bill mileage in that case. But as far as attendance at regular meetings or special meetings, I would be willing to waive that. And as I said in my introduction, I know it doesn't have anything to do with my qualifications, but I am in Clark County on most days once or twice a day anyway, because I do have a son who we just started at St. Agatha. So, and I live on the kind of Clark County end of Montgomery County, so it's not terribly, I think it's 15 minutes for me to get over here. So that is something I would be willing to waive to regular meetings, and if hired, I would be glad to outline that in a contract of employment.
Any other additional, I know you've been pretty clear, Mr. Berryman, any other additional expenses that maybe you could think of that, other than your flat rate, that we might need to be aware of?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Hendricks, with respect to mileage, I don't charge you all mileage. I don't charge you for I know that Ms. Nance is kind enough to say if you all want to go to a seminar, we'll pay for it. Our firm pays for all of our own seminars. Those are not asked to be reimbursed. We do not charge for any mileage wherever we have to go for whatever reason, because once again, I think that it's about these kids. You all have not paid for a hotel room. You've not paid for any expenses for our firm, and we would continue to not charge any of those.
Perfect, thank you.
I think that leads, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
So it sounds like you participate in KSBA conferences.
Yes, I participate in KSBA conferences. I'm a member of KSBA. I'm a member of the NSBA. Every night when I go home, I review all of the emails from KSBA and NSBA to determine if there's anything that is relevant to Clark County. So just today, we probably had 40 NSBA questions dealing with COVID, dealing with pronoun usage for teaching, ESSER funds, and so I review all those every night to see if there's anything that's applicable to Clark County.
I was entertained that of course, have you attended any KSBA, which is our,
No, I
School Board
would if I
Association.
were the school board attorney.
Right.
And I would not charge for attending those meetings.
I am not currently a member, but I was actually a presenting speaker at KSBA, and I think it was 2017, don't quote me on that, but around that time. My partner, Ms. Williams, she is a member of KSBA and the National School Board Association as well. I know that our contract with another board, they pay half of the cost to attend KSBA. I'm not requesting that, but I would attend if I'm, if available. If I am hired as a board attorney.
Okay, a lot of legal issues, I guess, could run off. You know, if you don't address stuff early, then it gets ahead of you before you realize really what's going on. If you were to see an instance like an RFP that we recently put out that could maybe have some potential legal backlash, do you take the position that you notify all 5 board members and a superintendent in an email when you realize that there is an issue, or do you feel like you just contact maybe the board chair and the superintendent directly? Because there is some kind of, we are 5 members that make up a board. How do you see communication lines in that specific instance?
Well, I would hope that those issues would be handled proactively and that, the proper steps would be taken so that an individual could recuse or before a vote. I will say, once you get into email chains with all board members at one time, you do potentially run afoul of open meetings laws. But I think those issues should be handled proactively rather than on the back end and then trying to correct things that have happened. But yes, absolutely, I would want to communicate with all board members, but I do caution boards about getting into group texts or group email chats with more than a quorum there prior to the meeting, just because you can run in afoul of open meetings.
Mr. Graham?
I would attempt to communicate with board members, but I would try to do so as much as possible during board meetings. However, if it were an emergency situation or a situation that needed to be taken care of very quickly, I would try to communicate with all the board members.
Mr. Thomas?
If made aware of it, I would communicate. In this particular, just recently, the issue, it's the elephant in the room.
Correct.
There was a motion that said RFP. I did not see, nor was I requested to look at any advertisement, and that's no fault of anybody else's. The practice has been in the past, and this would be the first time that I've been involved in it, was to actually send these out. And there were a number that were sent out in, I think, 15, maybe in 2018. and those were just used as, basically as a template. In this particular case, I actually had called here, I had not seen any RFP, didn't even know that there was a letter of interest that had gone out. Happened to call the office to see if in fact the bid had gone out, they said it had. I just actually submitted my bid. I did not even know the language until it was presented to me. Mr. Talby asked me a question about it and said there was a letter of interest, at which point I looked at it. Then when that question arose, I think that I sent an email to everyone explaining what my concerns were with the process. But had I been notified beforehand, I would have said this is what I think the issue is.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
No?
I'm sure I can think of another question.
Do you have a question?
I'm good, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go out. How do you remain unbiased and ethical? Because I think we live in such a, I hate to say it, a political society right now, that it is very hard to, you know, I think we've touched on, you know, you would contact all board members. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing that out there, and just, you know, just your honest opinion.
May I speak on that?
Sure.
I think it's the duty of the attorney to remain unbiased. This thing is something you have to work at constantly. And if you find yourself biased towards one group or another, it's time for you to get off, to walk away.
And I'll speak on that as well. You know, I grew up in Wolfe County. It's a very small county, and my mother was a school principal, and I had probably half the school administrators are my family, so I know what power in a smaller community the Board of Education can have. That's one thing I think I bring to this. I live in Montgomery County. I don't have any relatives that work for the board. I don't have any stake in hiring, firing, personnel decisions that the board would make. I agree with Mr. Berryman. The board attorney should act as unbiased, and their primary duty should be to advise the board as a whole body. And if there are individual personality conflicts or political agendas that run afoul from that, I think it biases the attorneys in such a way that they might not be able to properly advise the entire board and represent the board as a whole.
And you know, you say it can be political. The job can be political. I mean, it has been my role that I take any phone call from anybody, anytime. If you want to call me, and Dr. McComas can tell you, she calls me at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we have 6:30 or 7 o'clock conference calls, you know, where she would call and say, hey, here's some issues. You know, the goal is to provide advice, but we also have to be mindful of, you know, that if something is not correct, then it has to be addressed, regardless of whether or not it is considered to be political or not political. In my prior role as a county attorney, which is a political office, there was a situation where a prosecutor's family member committed an offense. You know, I had to prosecute that individual's brother, which was very difficult because this person was also very political. So you have to do what you believe is right. You know, there's a saying, Ms. Considine, that I know that I've shared with you and you've shared with me, right is right and wrong is wrong. And it doesn't make any difference who does it, you know, so you can't get too close, but you also have to be mindful of, you have an obligation, you have a fiduciary obligation. And, you know, there have been times where I've called KSBA and I said, look, I've got some questions. How do I handle that? And I'm not above that. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to go somewhere. I've called KSBA and say, what do I do? And they say, well, I'll never forget this gentleman said, hey, do you like your law license? And I said, I love it. He said, then you got to do X, Y, and Z. If you don't, and the board, if you don't fully represent the board, they're going to come after you. So, you know, sometimes you have to make those hard decisions, and we've got to determine whether or not we enjoy practicing law.
Not easy questions.
Do you have any more questions?
I do not.
Okay, I have one question, just because, maybe for the two of you, just because he's kind of given a blanketed, you know, X amount of dollars per month, whatever, and the two of you have submitted hourly proposals. Have you, I take it that this is your firm's general practice to do that from what you stated earlier. Has it served your clients better or worse? I think you may have touched on that. It saved them a little money or something.
we've always taken the position that we should be paid for the work we do. You know, and I have a host of other clients. If I'm not doing work for you, I'm doing work for them. So it's not like I'm just looking for more hours to bill by asking to be your board attorney. I will say, you know, we currently represent a couple other boards without going into confidential who we represent, which is not confidential, it's public record, but without going into details about what we bill. Of course, that's all available by open records. I will say there are months we may bill many, many hours. There are months where we may have minimal, probably under 10 hours, just depending on what's going on. We've worked with superintendents who like to have us on call for multiple times a day for different policy questions, different issues. And then there are superintendents who are more familiar with the role and don't have as many pressing questions. So I think ultimately it's up to the board to decide if they want the attorney at every meeting, if they want the attorney to field lots and lots of calls. And I'm happy to do whatever the board needs at your all's discretion.
Mr. Baker?
Well, I've never overbilled anyone, but I would join in what my counterpart just said. I will bill for the hours that I'm asked to give legal representation. I remember once when I was working for Valvoline, we had a big firm who was outside counsel, and my boss, Landy Williams, asked me to do the job, and I said, I'm going to need 2 days. I did the job in 2 days, and I had a motion for summary judgment, and at the same time, this case has been going on for 10 years, the outside counsel billed for the same research that I did, something like $30,000. I try to be effective, try to be thorough, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel and go from the very beginning of time and overbill. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. Are there any more questions from the board?
I'll just ask one more.
Okay.
This is just to Mr. Behrman. It's listed in your resume that you're a first assistant Clark County attorney. Would that be a conflict of interest?
I do not believe that it would be a conflict of interest. I represent the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and I see no conflict with that. Indeed, I do a lot of dependency, neglect, and abuse work, and I also do some work with the school board already in prosecuting truant students and prosecuting educational neglect. So I'm very familiar with that. So I neglected to tell the board that I have done some work in this area before.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? Are you good? Good. Any closing comments from the three? Anything you would like to leave us with, I guess? Mr. Behrman, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'd just like to say that, again, I'm honored to be in front of you. I believe that my lack of experience in this law should not be terribly important, that I can come up to speed very quickly. And quite frankly, I would be reluctant to give any type of advice without doing some thorough research on it. Even if I thought that I knew the law, and even if I thought it was pretty easy, it would have to be something I absolutely knew 100% before I gave advice on. It's easier to do the research and give good advice than give bad advice and have to come back and change things that have been done based upon that advice.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
In doing this job, I think that I do it as good as anybody. on the weekends, I actually take your all's policy and procedure books home. I read Robert's Rules of Order. I actually keep a copy of KRS 160 at my house so that I can see what board duties are. I actually subscribe to various organizations to see what the current state of the law is. I think that we have provided good advice to this organization, whether it be mediating an Americans with Disabilities Act here, which kept us out of court. You know, we provide good service, and we would just like the opportunity to continue to provide that service to this board.
Thank you. Ms. McCoy?
I would just like, first of all, thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. And I want to emphasize again that I'm here on behalf of myself and on behalf of my firm. And my firm's been in existence since 1876, not the 1700s. You know, not only have I experience in education law, but my partner has extensive service and research, and she has so many resources that are available to her. I was talking to her today about a new OSHA regulation where school boards have to report potential COVID fatalities within the board if there's been an exposure at school. You know, the realm of education law is constantly changing. You've got so many constitutional law implications because you're a state actor doing every day-to-day business, where most businesses don't have that. And I've always been intrigued by educational law, and I've always thought it was just a fascinating area of the law. And I just hope to assure you that not only if you decide to retain our services, not only are you retaining me and my experience, but also that of my colleagues, and I feel like that we are more than capable of meeting your needs. I also will say that I think it's important that the board feel comfortable with the board attorney and not have an adversarial relationship with that person, so that you're comfortable with asking questions and raising concerns to that individual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, we'll move from item number 5 to item number 6. Consider approval to hire a board attorney. Is there any discussion? Or a motion?
I'd like to make the motion that we hire White, Peck, and Carrington for school board attorney, effective 9/28/2021, and that we issue our 30-day notice to Brian Thomas with Grant, Rose, and Pumphrey.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, Acting Chair Pro Tem. Unfortunately, the way that the language is included in your board regular meeting is only for the approval. It is not for the termination of prior services.
Dr. McComas?
You do have a policy, as Mr. Thomas stated earlier, about the staff attorney, and that in certain special situations, you can hire more than one attorney. 1.7, in special cases, the board may employ additional attorneys as needed.
So if we can hire all 3 of these applicants tonight, essentially.
Under the policy. that is correct.
Okay. Ms. Richardson, is there any discussion? Ms. Richardson, would you like to reword your motion or take it off the table, or how would you like to proceed?
So we're thinking that I need to take the 30-day notice letter off. Is that what you're?
That would be a question for Mr. Thomas, but in reference to the staff attorney policy, which we do have more than one staff attorney because we have some of the other ones that do some representation for us. But it does say in special cases, the board may employ additional attorneys as needed, and that's per 01.7 under staff attorney powers and duties of the Board of Education.
Okay, so I can reword my motion to hire White, Peck, and Carrington as school board attorney, effective 9/28/2021.
There's a motion made to hire White Peck Carrington as the Clark County School Board Attorney as of 9/28/2021, made by Ms. Richardson. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second, Ms. Considine. A motion made. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn made by Ms. Richardson. Do we have a second?
A second.
Motion made by Ms. Considine. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 3-0. This meeting
Thank
is
you.
adjourned at 8:15.
Thank you very